Hmm.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Imagination Podcast. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm really thrilled to bring to you a guest today that I actually connected with on Instagram through one of our former podcast guests. I found through her profile, Miss Molly Brown, which you guys know. She had her 3-part on here and is a mutual friend of my guest today, Kevin Sutherland, who I'm so honored to bring to you. Kevin actually put out a post recently that completely struck a chord in my own heart, where he was expressing he's ready to tell a story. Kevin's actually a survivor. He went through the childcare system, and he's going to tell you all about it today. But there were a lot of abuses that occurred along the way that are really important and critical to later parts in his story that were very misrepresented in the media. And we're bringing him on today, and he's going to be a guest on other podcasts, and he's going to start telling his side of the story, because the abuses that occurred and the things that occurred in his life were very much, like I said, misrepresented. And it's really important that we actually hear from him what happened, and we all can take something and learn from every single guest that's been on this podcast. Kevin is just a ray of light. The second that we connected, we've been talking now for a while before we even shot, and I could talk to him all day. You guys are going to absolutely love him. And to me, it's really inspiring to get people on the show that have gone through things that are so horrible to imagine going through, but you see them on here shining their light, standing in their power with confidence and with a smile and pure love in their heart. And Kevin's just such an absolute inspiration to me. I just told him he's one of my heroes, because he is. And I'm really excited for you guys to meet him. And I want you guys to all turn off whatever you're doing, focus on what he's saying. You're going to take a lot from his story, because there's a lot to learn. And we're actually going to be breaking this up into 2 episodes. So we're going to do the first portion of his story involving the childcare system and some of the systemic abuse that occurred. And then we're going to pick up next time when he was a little bit older, and we're going to go through some other parts of his story that were really critical as a result of what he went through growing up. So without further ado, Kevin, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you, honestly, and I appreciate it so much. Like I said earlier, just reaching out to me and just giving me this opportunity, because this is like the first time that I've done anything like this. But I've reached that milestone in my life, like I said, and I'm so ready to just obviously just speak about, just be my truth and give my truth and tell people exactly, why things happened the way that they did and what I've learned from it and stuff as well. So yeah, it's great to be here. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, no, well, just as I said, starting off with like the childhood abuse that I went through when I was in care. When I first went into care, when I was like, I went in first for a few weeks when I was 5 years old. And there was an incident that took place when I was in care in one of the care homes. An Australian man did something to me. I don't remember or recall the specific details, but I do remember something that was unusual about it. And I think as a 5-year-old, if that stays in your mind at such a young age, then there's something not right about it, if that makes sense. There's something that, if you recall a memory and it's of you naked with a man who's obviously an adult and you're only 5 years old, and it's in a toilet or a bathroom or whatever, and you're in care, and it was, the reason that I remember he was Australian is because of the fact that he mentioned he was using a part of my body to describe how far away Australia was from the UK. I don't remember anything else, but I just know that there was something that took place there. I'm looking into going through like sort of hypnosis, or I don't know how you pronounce it, but that kind of therapy where it can sort of open up parts of your mind to stuff that you've blocked out. Because for me, I feel to remember that and the details of it, there must be more to it. There has to be more to it. That was my first experience of going into care. I was sort of backwards and forwards until obviously I went into care when I was 10 years old until 16.
How did you end up getting into care?
Basically, I went into care because my mum at the time had mental health issues, and she had like sort of like drinking problems. And to be blunt, just to put it out there, nobody else in my family wanted me. So that's how I ended up in care. As an adult, I've went round family members on both sides, mum and dad, and asked, relatives and stuff, and been like, why was I in care? Because I came from quite a big extended family, and it is a big question that's never really been answered via any real proper explanation. And it is something that will probably remain like that, to be honest. But the way I look at it is, that people could have stepped in at the time, but nobody chose to. They just kind of let the social work department and stuff take over, and that's how it went. It went from there to it went from bad to worse to bad, and just kind of escalated. That was my first experience. So when I went into care, and that's something that I'll be mentioning, like what I said to you, the upcoming child abuse inquiry. When I give evidence at that inquiry, I'll be focusing a lot on to do with, my first encounter with abuse when I was in care. Because it was sexual what he done to me. He touched me anyway, and he should never have touched me. That was completely unacceptable. But I just, how you just sort of know in yourself. I don't know if it's, you just know something else has happened, and your mind's blocked it out. So it's obviously been that traumatizing for a 5-year-old, for me to have blocked it out. When I was in that care home, I was having to sleep on a mattress and everything on the floor, because they didn't even have a bed for me. I should never have been placed in that care home. It's since been knocked down and replaced with like some other sort of secure unit. But that's my memories from being in there, just this Australian guy doing that to me. And there was also another incident that happened when I was, the only time, because I was never really in foster care, it was always care homes, but when I was in a foster care I was with a family, and there was another incident. It's like fragments. I only remember just it's like tiny little episodes. I don't remember sort of the before or the after, but I remember an incident when I was living with this foster couple, and I was wet in the bed because obviously I was still a child. This was round about the same age, 5, 6 years old, and I was wet in the bed, and her punishment to me for doing that was putting me in cold baths. And I always remember being hung upside down, literally hung upside down at that age over a cold bath, and her like shaking me, the woman that we were staying with. And I remember mentioning that to the woman that I'm liaising with at the child abuse inquiry. And weirdly, that seems to be quite a common thing that they've came across, a lot of abuse with regards to cold baths. And I don't know whether the hanging them upside down is a feature or whatever, but when I mentioned that to her, she seemed to come at it from an angle of, we've heard this quite a few times now. So that's something that I'm going to be obviously discussing a lot when I give my evidence at the end of this year, because that was obviously traumatizing, the fact that it's stuck in my mind as well. And I don't remember anything else. I think I lived with them for maybe about 2 or 3 weeks. I remember nothing about this family other than just that one isolated incident. So it's like your memory just erases everything around them in order to, I don't know, protect you or whatever. And I just remember that one particular incident with the bathroom. And it's just disgusting, that was obviously how that woman felt that I needed to be dealt with, at that age. And I think it's normal, if you're taking out your family home and you're just a child, then you are going to wet the bed and things like that, because you're in a strange place with complete strangers. You don't know who these people are. And I was getting punished, for just, I think, and that was a normal reaction, I think, to the situation that I was in. So yeah, it was a horrible experience, definitely. But I'm still trying to fully unravel all this, as I go through this sort of journey and speaking, with people like yourself. I'm just unraveling just the whole charade of things that has happened, and obviously we were speaking earlier and I sent you that email, and that's, I wrote that down because it helps kind of keep me on track with regards to, you know, what happened first, what happened second, and keeps a timeline, because there's so much, and that's why obviously we decided to do it in 2 parts. Because there's so much, it's hard to kind of not jumble it up and jump all about the place. So obviously, if I am a bit like that, that's just my natural, that's just how that's the best way that I can explain what I've been through. Because sometimes when you touch on something, you'll go down another path or you'll talk about something else, but it's predominantly going to be focused on obviously what happened. Another thing that I want to mention as well, which I think is important, and it's obviously something that will be discussed at this inquiry, is that, you know, I was placed in care because of my mum's mental health issues and because she couldn't cope. But there was also a man that was in our lives, a former partner of my mum who she met. And this is, once again, it's so horrible because there's so many just dark episodes where I just remember nothing. And it's, somebody said to me not that long ago, I was telling you, a friend who I speak to about things, but I never really speak to her about this because she just doesn't get it. She said to me, she was like, do you think you're better just leaving it and not opening it? Because that's like opening Pandora's box. I just totally resent that because I've been living with this forever. So how can I just put it away in a box and a shoe cut and just hide it away like it's nothing? Like I said to you as well before, I think about being in care every single day. You know, whether it's a flashback or it's something traumatic, I always just, it's reinforced in my mind because it was such a big part of my life, getting passed from one place to the next, from pillar to post, meeting this person, that person, and so many different incidents and things that have happened. It's just engraved in me now, you know, and the only way that I can heal from it is to speak out about it and to, you know, do what I'm doing exactly with you just now. You know, so
it's hard too. Like when I look at things that I can't remember, just maybe because I was too little, you have feelings attached to the things in your life, no matter how much or little you remember, you carry the emotions with it. And it helps to heal emotions when you understand what happened to give them to you.
Yeah.
So I know maybe not everybody is comfortable knowing their story right away, and they're okay with their mind blocking some of that out because they're not ready for it. But I think when you get to that point where you are ready, it helps to have the full context if that's what you want, because it helps you deal with how it affected you for your whole life since then and all the emotions. And with healing, it helps to know why you were hurt to begin with and to have the completeness of that story.
No, you're completely right. It's been like for me, it's been a gradual process. I think it's been a build up. And I think 30 for me, I don't know why, it just seems like the perfect, for me anyway, it's the perfect time. Everything's happening for me very organically right now. You know, speaking with people like yourself, I reached out to Molly, I spoke to her last year, you know, putting myself forward with the child abuse inquiry. I'm speaking with another couple potential podcasters that I'm going on, a couple of journalists and stuff like that, just kind of preparing this for what I want it to be, and that is to drive as much attention and awareness to my case as possible, because obviously, you know, and we'll discuss that in the second part, because that will be focused on obviously the whole, you know, the blackmailing and the offending behaviour that happened as a result of what I went through whilst I was in care, basically. And that's why I want this to be aired. I want people to hear it, because there's been so much of just a one-sided narrative put forward, and people have only ever seen or heard that, you know. And if people Google me or they put in Kevin Sutherland Edinburgh, you know, like when we were discussing the whole name change thing earlier and all that, you know, there's reasons as to why, you know, I changed my name and everything. You know, it's nothing to do with the offending behaviour or me trying to slink away or get away from it. It's to do with issues that I was dealing with whilst I was going through care. And when I first initially changed my name, you know, you were even saying it yourself, it was like I just, you know, wanted to just rid that from I just wanted to create a new me. I wanted to get away from it, and I wanted to start afresh. Had absolutely nothing to do with me trying to avoid detection with regards to the, the blackmailing or whatever, because people know what they know. You know, they can Google. You know, everybody, I feel nowadays, when they meet somebody, you know, at some point or another, they do a check on them. You know, and if that's the first things that they read about you online, before they really get to know you, they're not going to have the best opinion of you. A lot of people, you know, I would say, to be honest with you, the majority of people that know me or get to know me, they've been completely fine and they understand why I did what I did. But we touched on it before as well, is that what's funny is the people that I've met me with like hostility, and I've had, you know, the whole sort of, you know, who do you think you are? You're not a vigilante, you know, you're not above the law, you're no judge and jury. I've never claimed to be. I've far from ever claimed to be that. They seem to be the people that then turn out to be somewhat that way inclined, you know, with regards to paedophilia or abusing children or doing something that's got question marks around it, put it that way. Because why else would they come for me, you know? Like, I've never tried to say that, oh, what I did was completely right. I've just tried to, or what I'm trying to do now, and I think I'm doing it, is explain why I did what I did. You know, I'm not trying to say it was, you know, go out there and do it or it was right. It was my coping mechanism at the time, and I fell into it because I was introduced to it by one of my abusers, you know. And it's a messed up situation, you know. So from when I went from being in the foster care environment for a short time, and obviously when that incident with the Australian guy, I went into full-time care when I was 10. I went into a care home which was in Edinburgh at the time. I was there for about 2.5 years. There was a lot of violence that went on there. I witnessed a lot of stuff that was just really questionable, and I still think about, you know, was what went on there. Abuse with other young people, inappropriate.
Were you the only child in that house that they were fostering, or were there other?
In that care home altogether, there was about 8 or 9 of us.
Okay.
That's another place that's since been knocked down, closed down. I'm requesting my records from the time I was in care, and apparently a lot of the records have been destroyed. And I don't know, obviously that's a lot to do with maybe a cover up or whatever, but I just want to know whether mine are there or not. The woman that I've been liaising with regards to getting my records, it's almost like she's kind of setting me up to feel like, don't be too prepared that you're going to get them because they might be destroyed. But I said to her, I was like, I was in care, you know, in the 2000s. So it wasn't a lot of the child abuse inquiries focusing on stuff in like the 70s and the 80s before, you know, computers and whatever. So a lot of my records should be there. And if they're not there, then that is highly questionable why any of my records went missing. Because even though it's a long time ago, it's not that long ago that it was just all paperwork and stuff. So I'm waiting. I've been trying to get a hold of those records. I started the ball rolling at the beginning of this year, and I've still not really heard anything back with regards to it. I put in a subject access request under the Data Protection Act and requested them. So I'm hoping to get them. But if I don't get them, it's fine. It's just that it would help me maybe recall some more memories, like what I said, some things that I've maybe forgot, certain incidents and whatever. And it would also be good to see, because I read some of my records when I was in care, how they sort of framed me and how they described my behaviour. And obviously, you know, we touched on it earlier again as to, you know, how they sort of see me as this really, you know, manipulative person, and, you know, how I look back on that as my coping mechanism, and how I was having to deal with that, being in a really difficult situation where nobody chose to understand me or give me the time of day, in the sense of asking me, you know, what had happened to you in these previous environments, and, you know, what went wrong in your life and stuff like that. It was just a containment. It was just a place that I was held and contained under a supervision order, and never helped, or never given any kind of love or support or encouragement or any of the right things that these places are designed or supposed to do. It was just like a prison, basically. It was a prison environment. And that's why I ran away from a lot of the care homes, because I just felt like I was being locked up. For what? That's the question, like, for what? So yeah, it's just it's difficult.
So what do you remember from, what are some of the memories that you have from that care home that you were at for that extended period of time?
The first one in Edinburgh, like the memories I have are just really like a lot of really nasty comments from the staff, like degrading comments, just the same kind of stuff that happened to me when we go on to the other bit about the Kibble Education and Care Centre, which is based in Paisley, Glasgow. The same sort of stuff happened there. There was never anything sexual that happened in the care home that I was in Edinburgh. It was just a lot of violence, a lot of inappropriate restraints, just the comments and things. I think emotional and mental abuse is sometimes the worst kind of abuse that you can go through, because it's the words last and linger with you forever. You know, they always stay with you. And why somebody would get themselves in a position of working with children to then just sit and bring them down and degrade them and abuse them. I've seen a lot of strange things in that care home. I was very hyper vigilant as a child. I think because, you know, there was abuse things that happened to me when I was younger. And I know obviously I touched on the guy that my mum was living with. I have no memory of what if he abused me or not, but the social work department did get in touch with my mum when they found out she was in a relationship with this guy, and inform her that he had been in prison for assaulting like an 18-month-old baby. But I don't know if it was sexual, but it was some sort of assault, and he got a lengthy prison sentence for it. I just remember as a child being around him and feeling absolutely terrified, like that terrified that I would pee in my room because I didn't want to get up at night to use the bathroom because he would be there. So he must have done something. But there's so many things that I'm still trying to, as I said, unravel, because my memories blocked it out, because I genuinely feel it's just been so traumatic, you know, that for me to be feeling so terrified to do stuff like that as an adult looking back, I think you must have, you know, that just his presence and whatever else took place that you don't recall, it must have been really bad for you to be doing things like that, you know, scared to leave your room at night and scared to go to the bathroom and just terrified, basically. I was absolutely terrified of that guy. But as I said, I can't remember much with that. But I do strongly believe that he did something to me.
There's been a few other survivors I've had on here that have said, you know, it's not 100% of the time. Obviously, you can't just make that conclusion 100% of the time, but that's really a big warning sign that parents should look for with children, is how they respond and react to different adults in front of them, and to listen to that. If they're responding really negatively and they're scared, or they're reacting in a way that they don't around somebody they love, there could be some type of abuse happening.
Yeah, no, totally. And I've spoke to my mum and stuff about it over the years, and she obviously says that, you know, and I think she does feel really guilty about having him in her life. But I think she was just so kind of just focused on having a man in her life and just having somebody there for her, rather than, like what you said, picking up and seeing the signs of, well, look at my son's behaviour and the way that he's behaving. Because when she did eventually split up from him and the social workers came in, and, you know, we were put on a child protection order and everything because of it, because of just like the negligence, like the fact that this guy even got into our house. But, you know, as I said, if something happened to me with him and I can't recall it, then it's obviously because it was that traumatic. That wasn't solely the reason why I ended up in care. I ended up in care because, you know, my mum says that she couldn't cope with me, and, you know, she had her mental health, she had all her own issues and stuff to deal with. I've always said to my mum, you know, when we spoke about these things, the best thing that could have happened for me is that I went into care, and I went and hopefully just stayed with a stable foster family, and that was it. This whole getting passed around and backwards and forwards, and 1 minute I'm at my mum's and then I'm back in a care place, or I'm with a foster family or whatever. It's so, you know, debilitating. Your mind's all over the place, and you don't know who these people are. And, you know, like, one thing I will say as well is, like, there's nobody that I can sit and say that's my childhood friend, or I can go right back with them. My mum moved like 15, 16 times when we were growing up. And then to add in the amount of times I was passed around the care facility when they obviously got involved, I never went to the same primary school, or you know, I never went to the same school long enough to make friends. You know, that's how disrupted my childhood was. that there's nobody I can sit and go, oh, well, we've been friends forever because we grew up together. That's just something I cannot relate to. I've not got like the family album that I can sit and flip through and go, I know this, that happened, and that's a memory and stuff like that. My memory is in those care records that I'm trying to access. That is my childhood, and that's what's going to try and bring back some sort of, levels of things and awareness of stuff that I've blocked out and stuff that I've forgot. But moving on to the part that so obviously that happened when I was in the care home in Edinburgh. There was a lot of comments. I was running away from there a lot as well.
Did you ever report their comments? What would they do if somebody? How do they handle that for people? A lot of people have never been through the system, but what happens when you actually do report it? Do they even do anything?
Well, they have like a children's rights officer that comes in and sort of reviews the running of these places, and they'll have like inspectors and stuff that come in like once a year. But it's always, I think it's quite contrived the way they do it, because it's like they're given warning. So the inspectors coming in on such and such a date, so they'll all run round and get the place prepared and ship out who they need to ship out, or get them out on a day, or clean the place. And I just found it just so fake, like you're wanting these people to come in and see the real environment that we're living in, and to just see how the run-ins of the place are, and there's all this preparation put into it. It's like running a business. That's exactly what they're doing. They're running a business, and they're wanting to keep the facade up that everything's working perfectly and normally, and there's no issues and there's no problems. And I picked up on that pretty quickly as a child. So when I started speaking out when I was in care and getting children's rights officers in and stuff, I think eventually I did effectively protect myself for a lot of potential further abuse, because I was never sort of seen as a silent child, if that makes sense, the one that you could just sort of prey on and pick on. I obviously experienced stuff when that Australian guy did things to me. And then there was another incident that we'll get on to with regards to the guy who abused me when I was 14, 15, regarding the introduction to these chat lines where he blackmailed me effectively. But that's the guy with the blackmailing, the Australian guy, and the former partner in my mother's is the only times that I can recall the sort of sexual element being involved. But with regards to mental, emotional, and obviously sometimes physical, that happened in probably all the environments that I was in care. With regards to it, when you reported these things, you were never listened to or believed, because you were just a child and you were going up against a group of adults that were colluding with each other and covering, oh, he's just lying, he's manipulative. So when I get these care records, hopefully eventually when I get them, they're going to be full of a lot of lies, because it's just going to be one-sided opinions of someone. It's not going to be factual information. It's not like it's been recorded on a camera or a CCTV or whatever. It's just somebody writing down what they think. And there's so many people that work in the care system that shouldn't work there. So many, because even if they're not abusing kids, some of them just see it as a job, just something to make money. And I think that's, if you're going in with that attitude, you shouldn't be working with children. You're working with children that are, a lot of these kids that I was in with came from really abusive backgrounds that understandably should have been in care. Why I was in care is a big question mark. When I came from such a big family and there were so many people that had availability and room to put me up, I should never have been left to go through a care system. A care system for me is somebody who is a last resort. That's some people that end up in care, it should be an absolute necessity, last resort, like nowhere else to go. For me, that to me is just, it boggles my mind as to why at such a young age, everybody just sort of washed their hands and were just like, oh, we're too busy dealing and getting on with our own lives to care about what happens with you, basically.
And then it's like you go into care and you're treated the same. You're passed off to different families. And not only that, but it's like the consistency you do have with the staff, they're also abusing you in ways. Like it makes me really sad to think how many kids are in these systems and how important it is for a child's development to have consistent, loving relationships where they're learning those unconscious patterns of reactions to things, how to act towards other people, how to love, how to really function in this world in a way that makes you, understand how to be a good human and to treat other people with love. That had to have been so confusing to not have that consistency. And it's like every single adult that you meet, they're either putting you down or abusing you, or you only have them for a certain amount of time. Even if you did have a loving family, it's not permanent. Like you're there for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a couple of years and then passed on again. So that had to have been so hard for you.
Yeah, no, totally it was. And it wasn't just the staff in the care homes, it was the social workers as well. So you've got the failing of the social work department as well as the staff who are running the care homes. And then obviously children's rights officers and so-called children's rights officers anyway, and inspectors and people everybody had a responsibility and they never met their duty of care certainly where I was concerned, and where a lot of people were concerned, because I witnessed a lot of trauma. I can even recall when I was in that care home in Edinburgh, there was a young girl, and I don't know what happened or how she ended up pregnant, but I remember I was witnessing her having a miscarriage and I was only 12 years old, and I was witnessing that. Now I know that it's maybe out of their control, but that should have been taken away from us, or it should have been, we shouldn't have been, I certainly shouldn't have been exposed to that, at that young age. And just the violence, and there was a man who worked in that care home, and I'm absolutely convinced that he was abusing one of the young boys that was in there, because that was a mixed environment, that care home. There was girls and boys in it before I went to the all boys school, that Kibble. And obviously the one of the boys that was in the care home in Edinburgh, I can always remember a male member of staff leaving his room, and I can always remember witnessing him zipping up his jeans when he was walking out. And even as a child, I remember thinking, that's not right. Is there something going on there? And you're having to think like an adult when you're a child. At that age, I shouldn't be having to think about things like that. I should be thinking about fun things and school and just normal kid stuff. I shouldn't be thinking, oh, wait a minute here, is that guy abusing the one of the kids up the hall from me? I'm having to think like that. It's fucked up. And it's made me have to grow up so fast that it stole my childhood from me. I'd say that I'm not particularly good with children because I never had a childhood myself, if that makes sense. I've got nieces and nephews, and I've got a good relationship with my nephew and stuff, but I've not got the kind of bond that I think I would have had if I wasn't put through so much trauma in my own childhood. So I'm quite distant from them. I'm quite kind of, we all live our separate lives. But my family is very broken. We have been like that anyway. We've all lived our separate lives. We've all got bloody different surnames, regardless of me changing my surname. Everybody's just, for even call us a family, is not even the right term, because we all live in our own little worlds. My mum and dad got divorced when I was 2. And they've lived their separate lives, and it's always been like that. There's always been an eerie silence around my family. Just nothing's ever been allowed to be spoken about or discussed or anything like that at all.
Why do you think that is? Because that's not just your family, that's everywhere. These topics, they're not common anywhere. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's the old school generation though, isn't it? That's what it is. It's their mindset and mentality is that, just kind of, if it happened to them or they'd been through it, they have to just get on with it, just deal with it. They don't want to talk about these things because it puts people up for being raised for accountability. It raises questions. It means that people, you're exposing things, and it makes people uncomfortable. A lot of people just don't want to, they just don't want to hear it. They would rather sit and talk about more trivial matters. I'm dealing with all this right now, right? And it's so much to deal with, the child abuse inquiry. And I'm putting myself forward for this. I'm putting myself out there. So I expect what's to be kind of expected in a situation like this. But it would be, and obviously, people like you, I get support from this kind of community, which is amazing. But it would be so nice if I had support in my actual physical life, like people that know me, friends that would rather phone me up and talk about really trivial matters involving squabbles with people and their neighbors, and just really matters that are just, it's like stuff that's just very trivial. I really wish somebody could come and maybe, offer me a bit of support and go, right, look, Kevin, I know you're going through all this. I'm here for you. Let's talk about it. I've got to reach out to people online and get that kind of level of support. I've never been able to really encounter it in real life because it's hard to find. It is hard to find because these people that I'm referring to, that seems to be the kind of general feeling around this topic. And you've said that yourself. People just want to kind of overlook it and talk about something else. And it's not even about them keeping it more lighthearted or getting deep and heavy. It's just like it's off limits. They just don't want to go there, because either they don't feel as passionate about it as us, or they just can't relate. And I think even if you just can't relate, you should want to know these things for the education and to be aware, especially if you're an adult and you're going to have kids yourself, or I think this is something it's mandatory. Everybody needs to be made aware of this. People do need to know these things. It's not a topic or a hobby or something that you take up because you have, it's something that's essential. It's an essential factor in our society. We need to know that kids are being abused in care homes and other environments, like me personally, because of what I've been through, and because it's been like the local authorities acting as my parents effectively, and how much they've let me down. It needs to be exposed. It needs to be discussed, because it's traumatizing. It lives with people every single day. You never forget being in these environments. You never forget the things that they say to you, and why would, and you obviously question that. You think you're getting paid to work here and you've chosen this occupation, but you're abusing the children by telling them that they'll amount to nothing and they mean nothing and their family doesn't love them and nobody cares about them, and they're going to end up like this or they're going to end up like that. Just really nasty, negative, disparaging, just comments that you just wouldn't make to kids. They people are supposed to build you up and make you feel you can be the best version of who you are, but instead they're tearing them down, and I just don't think there's enough checks put into some of the people that they let work in the care environments. I think they're too quick to just sort of let a lot of what I noticed when I was in care is it was a constant flux of agency staff, outsiders coming in. They were never technically employed by the care home. They were just brought in from like agencies. One of them I think was called like Swift or something, I remember. So I can always remember they used to get like Christmas cards from all these agencies. So basically just random people coming in that were getting, all they were carrying out as simple police checks. That's like nothing. Like, how if somebody's got no convictions for something, it doesn't mean that they're not capable of hurt. If anything, it means that they're crafty at what they do and they've been able to avoid detection. People think just because somebody's not got a criminal record there must be a good person or a good candidate to look after children. That's not the case at all. That's
a lot of the best criminals are the best because they don't get caught, right?
Mm-hmm. No, totally.
And it is interesting because these topics, whether it's something as horrific as what you went through, or Molly Sky Brown or Samantha Brown, whether it's that level of trauma or simply I had my heart broken from a boyfriend, or I lost somebody in my life, they passed away and it was really traumatizing to me. We all experience these different levels of trauma or micro traumas, yet we're so afraid to have these conversations, whether it is parent to child or friend to friend, boyfriend to girlfriend, husband to wife, teacher to student, social worker to foster care child. We're so uncomfortable having these conversations, yet really it's the one thing that we all have in common, that we've all struggled. We're so hyped and conditioned to only talk about, it's like I think part of the problem too, I've had people comment, how do you have these conversations with survivors? It's such hard material. And it's like, that's so sad that you feel so disconnected from people that you might not even know how to have a conversation about something hard, so you don't, period. And a lot of
Mhm.
people, I think, do that because they don't even know how to respond to hearing something hard,
Mhm.
and it's sad because especially in cases like yours where these adults missed out on such an opportunity. Imagine if all those care workers and staff and social workers, if they genuinely were there because they loved children and wanted to help.
Mhm.
What a missed opportunity for millions and millions of kids all over the world going through these systems. Because a
Yeah.
lot of these stories that I hear from being in the care system, a lot of the staff and social workers, they don't seem to be passionate about what they do.
No, definitely not.
So sad because they have such an opportunity to produce these beautiful children who have great lives despite being in a care system away from their parents, and they fail children like
Mhm.
by doing that.
No, completely. You've got to have a passion for it, and you've got to love children, and you've got to want to understand them, and you've got to also just have a sense of care about you. And what I noticed whilst I was in care, and what I've also noticed as well since as an adult, speaking with some people that work in the care environment, work in the care system, and hearing how they talk about their jobs and stuff like that, a lot of them just sit and bang on about the money and the aspect, and they're not getting paid enough, and it's like, well, if you like, why are you doing it then? What if like, what is your reasons for? Because it is a difficult job. It is, of course, it's going to be a difficult job, but if you're not cut out for it, and your heart's not in it, and you're not in the right, then don't do it. Don't go and put yourself in an environment where you're leaving really long-term, lifelong scars on kids. People like me, you're leaving scars that we have to carry for the rest of their lives. Half these people that have came in and out of my life, they don't remember, they don't care, they don't remember me. They've met that many children. To me, I'm just like another number. I was just like another statistic to them. That's why I refuse to be silent on this matter now. I refuse to be just a nameless person and this whole systematic abuse involved in the care system. I refuse to just be shrugged off. I refuse to be held hostage by my past. I refuse to be discredited because of the crimes that I committed. I refuse all of that, because at the end of the day, I was a fucked up kid who was let down by people who were supposedly professionals. So if they're professionals, they should have been better at looking after me than my own family were. And they failed at that. They went through qualifications and got degrees and went to, they done whatever they needed to do to get their leg and their foot in the door, and they still never managed to do a good job. So it's like, and how they can put all the blame on a child. You can't blame a child for stuff. See, when people come around and say to me, like even members in my family, and they'll recall things and they'll say, oh, you did this as a child and you did that as a child. And I'm thinking, you're having this conversation with me now as an adult, and I look back and I see the child. You don't see the child. You just see somebody who was causing you problems. So you can't sit and blame a 5 or a 10-year-old child for their behavior. You look at what's causing that behavior and what they're exposed to and the adults that they're around, and what's actually made up what's causing them to act out, what's causing this behavior, because I was quite out of hand sometimes and wild and acting out and whatever in that. But I think I just wanted to be loved. I wanted to feel stable and secure. And I've never felt stable and secure. I think that's carried on as an adult because I've moved about so much, from city to city. I've been here, there, and everywhere. I've never been able to sort of settle down because I think I've moved about so much in care. It's carried with me, so I've never been able to sort of lay down roots. Part of it I just embrace because I just think, do you know what, it is who you are. Just, I think I'd get bored being in the same place for too long. But at the same time, reflecting back, I can understand why I'm like that, because I never had a stable upbringing. I never lived in the same place long enough or went to the same school long enough to have any kind of stability. Like, like what I said to you, there's nobody in my life I can go back with and say, oh, we grew up together, or, or even, I can't even say, oh, we were in care together, because I was moved about that much. it's so debilitating, and it just totally disables a child in their way of developing their, you know, like just their function in life. I'm surprised I've been able to do half the things that I've done, you know, like I've been in relationships, obviously they've been dysfunctional, they've broken down. I've been in abusive relationships with partners, things that have happened to me and stuff. You know, I think, yeah, when you're vulnerable, you attract a lot of really bad people towards you. You know, they can seek you out basically. Because nothing was ever instilled in me as a child. You know, these people never instilled any kind of goodness or any good qualities in me. I had to kind of just go out there and find my own way in life. And I think I've done my best at trying to survive. You know, I really have. I've maybe fallen off track and done the wrong things and stuff, but and this is my message. It's, you know, I want to hold these people accountable. I've been held accountable for everything wrong that I've done in my life. I've been named, I've been shamed, I've been dehumanized. I've had people say this, I've had people say that. You know, I've had people come after me. But why has nobody ever been held accountable for the things that were done to me as a child that contributed to how then people knew who I was and the things that I went on to do with regards to the blackmailing? That's the problem that I have with this. You know, I pled guilty, I held my hands up, you know, I'm transparent and open. I probably could have potentially got off with those charges, Emma, because there was very slim chance that those guys would have turned up to court, you know. I pled guilty. I was given a lot of information that was just overwhelming that I couldn't process at the time. You got to remember I was 19 at that point, and I was just, you know, I just did what I thought was the right thing to do at that time, and I've never tried to sort of run away from it or whatever. I've just tried to cope and live with it the best way I can. And I'm really got to remember what you said about the whole, you know, not letting the story own you, own your story. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm owning my fucking story because I'm sick of other people coming in and owning whatever narrative they want to take or depict from it, you know. And the reason I was given so much bad press at the time is, like what I said to you, it was the journalist who was putting the stories in about me was a former friend who had his own narrative and his own agenda and had a vendetta against me for completely separate issues. So there were so many articles that were written about me. I got a lot of stuff about me taken down off the internet because it was just complete lies. You can still find it, it's still there. But because it was just complete defamatory, it was just, none of it was true. It was just a complete character assassination on me as a person. The whole gender thing as well came out in the paper, the whole thing, because I went through that experience in that school, you know, the whole confusement about my gender and stuff. But that was just looking back on it as an adult, that was me just sort of rebelling, I think, or no rebelling, but trying to survive and, like what you said, trying to escape the environment I was in. Because at that point, you know, we're leading up to when I went into Kibble Education and Care Centre, when I went into the residential school, and that was my last place, that was my last placement in care. I was there from 12 till 16. So I was there for 4 years. And it was 4 really traumatic years, because everything that I went through up until that point, by the time I went to that residential school, I was already severely damaged by the care system. Obviously there was things that happened in my family life and stuff, with my, you know, the abandonment issues, and my parents and my family just never been there for me at all whatsoever, really. Partly a lot of it's because they don't know how to, and they couldn't, and a lot of it was just through sheer they didn't give a fuck, and it was negligence, and they just didn't care. So Kibble had all the tools, and they had all the abilities and structures, and they had all the psychologists, and they had everything there. They had all the resources that they had at their disposal. They could have really helped me, and everything in that place was just like the final curtain for which will lead on to what we'll talk about the next time regarding all the sort of blackmailing and stuff. So I end up in Kibble, and whilst I'm in Kibble, I become really hyper vigilant and aware of, you know, abuse in these environments. So I kind of put myself in a position where I'm quite loud, and I'm quite, in mind, I was saying to you, I was quite critique, and I was making comments about unprofessional conduct and stuff. And the staff are like, you know, who is he basically? Who does he think he is? We've got a kid coming in here telling us that we're acting unprofessional. That's because I had to grow up so quickly. You know, like I'm at that age, I shouldn't be questioning people's professional conduct, you know, in an environment like a residential school. Because I was seeing, you know, that Kibble was a really violent school, you know, they had me absolutely terrified. I went from I went from being in that care home in Edinburgh, and I was quite a loud child in that care home in the sense that I would act out a lot, to being absolutely even though I was quite loud in Kibble, I never once got restrained. There was never any violent or any kind of encounters in that sense, because they had instilled such a fear into me by the day I walked through that door with what I witnessed and how they dealt with other kids in that environment. I was petrified. I was just like, what the fuck? Like, how did I end up here? And I had no choice. I was forced. I went to a children's panel. My social worker had a big smile on her face. You're getting packed off and sent away to Kibble. And I was driven through
Have
there.
an affiliation with your care home that you were with? Why did they pick that school out of all of them that they could have picked?
I think just because it had this care home, if you Google it, it's like what I said to you, it really annoys me because they get government funding. They're also a registered business and they're a charity. So I think they get private placements, they get local authority placements, and they somehow can, under all of that money that they're making, because it was like millions that they're making a year, they can still orchestrate that there's some sort of charity. So they get donations and funding, and that they're just looked on as a really, really good school. So I think the social work department, you know, thought that it was a good choice for me to go there. I think maybe their logic, maybe that was something that they maybe thought was right. Maybe that was one good thing that they thought would have worked for me. I don't think there was any maybe calculated moves, so we'll put them there because something's going to happen to you. This is just something that happens in so many care homes. It's systematic, like what I said. It's something that's just it's how it is. I don't know why they picked it, but that's where I was placed. And
Homes, do they offer therapy for children or resources for any children that are really struggling? Because I'm sure that most of them do, whether they're experiencing trauma in the care home or not, they still have probably very deep identity issues dealing with the fact that they're not with their parents, you know? Do they offer any stuff like that, or is that even neglected in care homes?
No, I do remember that there was like sort of psychologists and things and stuff like that came in, but there was never really much interest, I felt. It was, once again, it was just like a containment environment. And the only difference between that place and the other places I was in is it was a residential school. So I was going to school there as well as living there. So it was a campus that I was on. There was obviously different buildings. You had like your education centre, and then you had like where you were living and stuff. It was like a boarding school, basically, the same sort of setup, identical to that. But they had all the frills, so to speak. You know, on the outside, when you look at this school and you drive in, it looks beautiful. It's, you know, they had gardeners, they had the whole shebang. The place was made to look like it was, you know, it was this really caring and loving environment. It was the nature of the staff who worked there that is the key to why the place was so toxic for me. You know, it was like some of the staff that worked in that place were like staff that they had just found off the street. You know, the way that they conducted themselves. I sent you that thing earlier. It's got a couple of links on it. You know, there was even a scandal that broke out when I was in Kibble in 2004. There was like a potential whistleblower, a member of staff, a former member of staff, because I'm assuming they got sacked, whether it was because of that or something else. But when I was in that care home, there was a scandal that broke regarding some of the stuff that I'm telling you about. So somebody else knows about all this, you know, the abuse that was going on, how violent the staff were towards the kids. But it was all shut down. And the reason I remember it is because the chief executive at the time, a guy called Graham Bell, he mentioned he got letters sent out like to all the social workers and all the parents saying that they had had bad publicity in the news, and not to believe it. It was just a disgruntled former member of staff who was telling lies. And I even recall at that time, and me being obviously in that place, thinking to myself, this kind of rings a bell, what I'm reading here because this is a true reflection of where I am. There's been very little said about Kibble. There's been a lot of care homes that have been really exposed in Scotland and hung out to dry, and they've been closed down because that's how bad the abuse has been. Like places, I'm sure, like Care Law and stuff, some places that you wouldn't have heard of, but they're local to that area. People in Scotland will have heard of them. Kibble was different because it was kind of like looked a bit on from the social work's point of view as kind of like the better kind of school, because they could hold up a good presentation and had a good cover and a good face and everything looked really nice. And we took a lot of the kids to America, and we took a lot of the kids on big holidays and whatever. So on the out, and they had a lot of publicity. They had like the royals coming in and people like that opening up certain segments of the school and stuff, Princess Anne and whatever. I never met any of them. I had no interest in half of the bullshit that went on, because I could just see through the smoke screen. I could just see that they were just all the conversations that I used to overhear with the staff was just all about kind of like how they were wanting to further their careers and position themselves and higher placements in that school. So it was just money. They were just all motivated by money, and I never heard anybody really talking about the welfare of the children, or how they really wanted to make a difference in any of the kids' lives. I just heard them talking about themselves and how they wanted to make a better difference for their own life. So it was just it was a business. It was never a care home. It was a business that was run like a business. It had business people working in it, and the children, we were just the objects that got used. We were just I'm trying to think of the words, but
like the commodity. You're what's making them.
Yeah, that's it. That's the word. We were just the commodity. They put out so many like little success stories of people that were there that went on to do really good things with themselves and whatever. But I even recall there was one incident, like what I said to you, most of the problems that I had there were the staff. It was never the other young people or the boys that were in the school. I never really had any issues with bullying or anything like that. It was always the staff that I was at war with. Because I could just see through them. They were so transparent. Some people can just pick up on those things, and I think because I'd witnessed and been through so much already, I could just see them for what they are. But they did have me terrified, because as much as I kind of complained and I spoke out, and there was sort of a line, an unspoken line, and I never kind of crossed that. I never caused any real issues for them. But when that news story, when the article came out in 2004, and there was obviously an investigation, and it was all kind of covered up, and nothing was ever done about it. I do remember commenting on that and saying to staff, there's got to be something in this, and all of them just basically saying to me, it's a pack of lies, none of it's true. And I'm thinking to myself, well, just a couple of nights ago, I seen like 5 big, massive male guys holding down like a 13 or 14-year-old guy and being really violent, like when they were restraining these kids, when they were acting out, they were fucking punching them and kicking them and laying into them and stuff, like basically fighting with kids, but like grown man, like actually attacking them. And I used to go up to the kids, right? Some of the kids that were getting violent, like, because I was never involved in violence, because I'm just not the violent, that was just never my MO or whatever. It was never why I was in care, because I was a big violent outburst. But I would go up to the kids, right? And this is what you're seeing with the mindset and the mentality, the children they're dealing with, how vulnerable they are and how they could get away with it. I would go up to the kids and I'd be like, you should report that. You should go to the police. You've got like physical injuries like that are unaccounted for, like that you couldn't have done to yourself. And they would say things to me like, oh, I'm not a grass, I'm not reporting that. So they were dealing with children that had grown up in environments where they were conditioned to believe that if they reported things to the police, like crimes that had happened against them, that was wrong. So they were picking on children that they knew that they would get away with, they would get away with abusing. So I think because I had reached that kind of level of awareness in myself and how dangerous an environment it was, I think they knew not to sort of do stuff to me because they knew that I would speak out against them. So I think it was a protective barrier. I think that was how I managed to cope and survive being in there, because I was, you know, I wasn't the sort of the silent one. But they never did it. They never done anything to help me. They were very, very just really nasty and condescending, and the comments that they would make. And it was my last year in Kibble. There was one incident that happened there where a young boy tried to stab me with a knife, right? And this is what I mean about mixing really vulnerable kids with kids that have got really high tendencies of violence. He was well known for it. I think he's now in prison, and I think he's on one of those indeterminate sentences, which means that he'll probably always be in jail. He picked up a knife and tried to stab me once when I was in there. So that was the only time that I recall having like an issue with another young person, but he was trying to attack and stab everybody. He eventually got shipped off to a secure unit. And that was obviously quite a difficult thing to deal with, but you were never like offered any help as to regards to how to, like, you know, like what you said, like there was never a counsellor or anybody brought in, or it was never spoken about or whatever. It was just kind of brushed aside as if like, oh, it was just another day in the office. You know, somebody pulled up a knife and tried to stab you. There was I even recall that there was times that I went swimming with them once, because they would take us out on like recreational things, activities. And I remember there was times that we went out swimming, and I'm positive that some of the kids that were there were in there for like sex offences. You know, so you were mixing me like, I wasn't in there because I had committed an offence. I was in there because there was nowhere else to put me. And they're putting me in beside children that are violent, picking up knives. There was a young boy that when we went swimming, he wasn't allowed goggles, and I always was wondering why, because apparently from what I heard, I don't know if this is true, that he put the goggles on when he was in the swimming pools and like proper perv on like the really young kids that were there. So the staff were aware of that. So when they went swimming, they were like always around him. And I just thought, and like, that's the kind of people I was forced to live with and mix with. Like, that's how does that help me in my development and growing up as a child? What kind of healthy environment is that for me? I was never exposed to any of that before I ended up in care. You know, like there was that, obviously, that partner in my mum's, but I wasn't mixing with, you know, knives and kids that were in for sex offences and stuff like that. It was just fucked up. The whole care system. They say that things are broken, but they're specifically designed in a way to keep them like that. You know, they want these children to remain fucking damaged, so that when they go out into the world, they end up in the prison system, and they end up in a system that's profiting them. You know, the bigger picture of things when you're looking at it. That's why it is the way that it is. I never take the system's broken. It's designed in a way to keep people who are like that in that bubble, in that life of existence, so that they've never got any opportunity to go for higher achievement or to better their lives. You'll hear of the odd single case, and they put that case up so high that it almost sets an example, as if like, well, everybody who goes to that school has got such a good opportunity. When I was in that school, they never gave a fuck about the kids. They never gave a shit. They literally used to go in, you know, they would come in, they would shut their office door, and they would be sitting having conversations amongst themselves. They would have very little interaction with us. You know, when we did get taken out on activities, all you ever used to hear them talking about is how they couldn't wait to finish their shift and go out for drinks with their friends. Like, we were talking about people being passionate and wanting to work with kids because they love kids and they want kids to have the best possible start in life and development. I never seen any of that with the people that worked there. I just seen people that were just looking at it as just a job and complaining about how they never got paid enough. You know, they would complain to us as children. I always remember, well, we don't get paid enough to deal with you. As if like, and this was another fucked up thing as well they used to say, which I always remember. Because obviously the funding that they got from the social work department for me to be there, obviously everybody pays tax, don't they? Or they should anyway. They would always put that on us, and they'd basically say that they were paying for us to be there. So somehow like they were paying for our placement, or we pay tax, and our tax is what pays for your placement to be here. And it's just things like that. They shouldn't be having conversations like that with kids. It's just unnecessary. It shows you the mindset of the people who are employed there. If that's the kind of things that they're saying to 12, 13, 14-year-old boys, you know, like that's not somebody, like if the children can see that, if I can see that, surely the people that were employing them and going through their interviews or whatever can see the mindset of these people. They should never have been working with children.
Now, what do we do to fix that? Would it even help if people that, let's just say people listening, if there was enough people listening and that hear your story that say, I want to become a social worker and change this, can that even happen with the way that the system's designed? Or do those people that actually do advocate for justice for children and who try to do a good thing, do those people get fired from the company or taken out? What do we need to do to fix this? Is it just as simple as different people getting in or them refining the interview process? Or is the whole system in general broken no matter who gets in it, a good or a malicious person?
See the word, it's not broken, it's like what I said, designed. It's designed like that. That's such a good point to make, because I recall when I was there, it was, let's say it was 90% bad, but there was there was one or two members of staff that I would love to get in contact with to this day, but I can't remember their names. But there was a couple of people in Kibble that quit their jobs because of the treatment that I specifically received when I went through that experience, thinking I wanted to be a woman and everything, right? Just because of how the staff were treating me because of it. So, you know, there was good people that were getting through the door. You know, not everybody was bad. But when she was trying to speak out in my defence and say, look, you are being really prejudiced towards him and he should be allowed to explore whatever identity that he thinks he might have. You shouldn't be trying to conform him into what your personal belief systems are. So there was people that were coming in and were wanting to make the kind of changes that you were talking about, but because they had so much against them and it wasn't the collective view, they were just having to leave because they were taking on a system and a fight that was too big for them to take on. I think with regards to that specific topic, I think things have changed a lot in that area now. I think if I was in that school now and I was going through that whole gender identity crisis or whatever, then it would be handled differently, because I think society's moved on a bit differently from that now. But this is the important point I wanted to make in this, and we kind of discovered this and uncovered this earlier, was that the reason that I believe that I convinced myself that I wanted to be a woman is because I was so just traumatized to being in that school. It wasn't because I genuinely felt like I wanted to be a woman. I felt like that at the time, but in hindsight, looking back, because it was an all-boys school and I just wanted out, I just wanted away from the school because it was just such an unhealthy environment. You were just dealing with these kind of comments and remarks and just the whole system, having to deal with that every single day. It was horrible. So I obviously thought to myself, well, it's an all-boys school. If I say to them that I want to be a woman, I'll be able to leave. So it pushed me to the point of fucking with my own head. You know, that school pushed me to the point where I was actually, you know, putting things into my own mind with regards to like my identity, that then carried on for at least a good few months after I left school, that residential school. Because mind, I told you, after I left, I literally phoned up my friend one day and it was just like that. I just said, I've made a mistake, get the guy down to cut my hair, shaved all my hair off and everything. And I just went back to just being a guy again and just was me. But that's how far it pushed me psychologically, that I actually convinced myself.
Right. You even changed your name during that period too.
Yeah, that was where the whole name change comes into that as well. So obviously, like, I changed my name when I first left Kibble. Obviously, my name was William Watson. That was my birth name, the name that my mum and stuff gave me. And then when I went to Kibble, when I left Kibble, I changed my name to Kelly Sutherland, because at that point I thought that I wanted to be a woman. So I wanted a woman's name. And Sutherland's my mum's second name. Watson's my dad. So, you know, I went with my mum's surname at the time. And then obviously the whole name change thing was, you know, I was Kelly Sutherland. Through the process, I was only Kelly Sutherland for like less than a year, and then I changed it to Kel Sutherland. And that's, you know, if people Google it, that's what people, the news articles regarding the blackmailing and everything, that's the name that I was convicted under. And then I just changed it to Kevin because I just think it's more suited and it's just more of a guy's name. I thought Kel's was quite feminine or whatever. It kind of just goes hey, like Kelly, Kel's, Kevin. You're kind of like
just Kevin. Kevin is perfect for you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to break away from it, but yeah. I'm not changing my name anymore. And one of the biggest misconceptions around my case as a whole is why I changed my name. People think, you know, it's a good point that you bring it up. People think that it's because of the blackmailing and stuff. That was nothing to do with the blackmailing. I was going through all that other shit, and I had already changed my name to Kelly. And then obviously, you know, I didn't want to be known as Kelly as when I went back to just being myself. A lot of people are like, well, why did you not just go back to being William? And I was like, I just didn't want to go under that name at all, because that was the name I went through care as. So all my care reports and everything will be under William Watson. So I just wanted completely away from that. I literally changed my name because of the care system and because of the whole gender identity crisis that I went through, which I feel, as I said, looking back in hindsight, was just a way of me trying to escape that school. That's truly how I've never felt like that about myself since. And this is like going back 15 years. I've never sat and thought, oh, you know, I feel like I want to be a woman or anything. It was just, I was a product to that environment at the time. And I just felt like this is going to get me out of here. And it was towards near enough when I was getting out anyway. So I don't know why I done it, but it was my way of coping. But
that's a big thing in our world right now, where you did this years ago, but right now there's a lot of kids right now that are looking to transition or going through something similar, a gender identity crisis, or they have pressure from parents or society telling them that that's what they need to do. Do you think that some of that could stem in other children also from that being a solution for them to almost escape or disassociate themselves from a situation that they're in also?
Yeah, no. What do you mean though? Like, do you mean like just
do you think that that's something that we should be looking into as a society?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so accepted that that's what people do, that nobody's saying, well, look, why does a kid want to be different than who they are? Do you think as a society we should be saying, like, are you going through something that you're trying to run away from? And is there healing that needs to be done before you make that decision?
Absolutely. No, I totally get the point you're making, because look at what I did, you know, look at the extreme levels of what I went to, you know, like I can't be the only person. I know that's taking it to the extreme, but you know, I can't be the only person that's done that. You know, I was in an environment that I was trying to escape. I was confused. I was disorientated, basically. I was all over the shop. So you're right. No, people should be asking more questions. I think now society's got to a point where people, when they say that they feel like, and it is controversial saying this, but I'll just say it anyway, that when people feel they've got gender identity issues, that people just sort of go with it, you know, and there's never really any questions. It's almost like, right, that's the norm now, you know, that's how it is. I'm not taking away from the fact that there is genuinely people out there that do feel that they're trapped in the wrong body. I convinced myself. So I think if you can convince yourself, then there is genuinely people who must feel like that. And I felt so strongly about it. So there will be people that, you know, that it's more real for them than what it obviously turned out to be for me. So no, you're making a really good point there. It is something that needs to be asked a lot more of, rather than people just going, all right, okay, you know, like that's obviously how you are. Because I think, you know, there's a lot of stories that I've read, a lot of people that change their mind, or they've just never been given the right kind of guidance or support, or people have just never took much interest in them. So they've kind of just had to go through it and navigate their way through it entirely by themselves. and then they've changed, or they've maybe not necessarily had any operations, but then they've reverted back, like what I did basically. I never obviously went through any changes or anything, but like they've just realized that it wasn't for them. So you're right. I think it's an escape for a lot of people. You know, a lot of people, they'll do anything to escape, you know, like just to get away from whatever it is that's traumatized them, or that they've really struggled with, just to shake it off. Some people will shave their fucking hair, some people will put on a dress, some people will take drugs, some people will drive fast, like whatever their way of coping. It's just about, you know, that is a big thing right now. And it just seems to be so oversaturated. It seems to be absolutely everywhere right now. And it seems to be just like a one sort of viewpoint on it. And more people should be asking questions as to, you know, how did they come about feeling that way about themselves? And, you know, because I certainly never felt like that when I was like younger. Most people that are like sort of transgender, they'll say that they had feelings when they were like 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 years old and whatever. That just happened because I was in that school. I know exactly why that happened, you know. But imagine if I never had the awareness to come out of that and realize that that is what it was. And I went away and ended up going ahead and fucking getting surgery and whatever, and then turning around to myself a few years later and going, oh, right, that was a mistake. So it was literally like the flick of a light switch for me, going into it and coming out of it. I literally switched the light on, I want to be a woman, switch the light off, no, I don't. It was that quick a moment for me. There was no sort of, it was confusing at the time, but coming in and going out of it, if it makes sense, it was just very instantaneous, and I never went back. And I'm quite comfortable and happy with the skin that I'm in with regards to my gender anyway. But yeah, no, it's that completely fucked my head up though when I was going through all that. You know, as you can understand, it was messed up, you know, that I felt so strongly that I needed to get out of a school, that I wanted to change my gender just to get away from the place because of how bad the staff were treating the kids. That in itself is just like, nobody chooses that, you know. Nobody chooses that, and nobody can sit and go, there's an underlying mental health problem, or try and label you or box you crazy just to explain it. That's always the easy cop out for these institutions and these places. Oh, you're a fuck up or whatever. Well, if I'm a fuck up, you made me a fuck up. You know, I was under your care. So whatever happened to me or whatever wrong with me is a downright responsibility to use, you know. And I want them to be held accountable. And that is the main focus of what, the main reason I'm speaking out is because I want to give evidence at this child abuse inquiry. I've got an appointment, I think, in November to sit down for 7 hours one day. And I think it's 7 hours on the second day, and just go through like everything from start to finish. And I want there to be acknowledgement. I want an apology. I want the full shebang. I want action to be taken against some of the specific pointers that I mentioned to you, but more so the overall running of that particular school is something that I do want to go after, because it's put on such a pillory, you know, such a really good school, and it improves children. And it's, you know, they've even, since I've left, I've looked at their website, and they now have a separate site sector. They've branched out, they've extended, they've got bigger as a business. They've grown massively, and they're fostering children. So they've got staff that are actually taking these kids, I think, home with them and fostering them in specifically built houses for fostering. So that they get a hell of amount of funding for so many different places. And I used to always go on about that because I could never really see where the money was going when I was there. You know, nothing justified, you know, the money that school was making. We should have been, don't get me wrong, we weren't living in like slummy conditions. It was clean, it was tidy, it was well maintained and stuff like that. But with the money that they were making, we should have been fucking living out at Michelin star restaurants, and you know, the intake, you know, that school was making. And it's always puzzled me, how can something run as a registered business and a charity at the same time? Is that no a violation of some sort of thing? You know, like how does that work? Have you ever heard of that? like a charity and a business at the same time.
I don't know how they would do that. The only way I could think is if they created two completely separate entities and treated them different. And even though people might know that it's all combined, it's still, those are still both money making machines. They're tax generators and, they
Mhm.
make a lot of money. So I could see stuff like that just being brushed under the rug and loopholes being able to be fined, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, they were obviously very clever at that aspect. Because I remember I never went out, but I remember they would encourage some of the kids to go up into the centre of town with like big buckets and fundraise for the school, as if like the school was on its knees and had no money, and we were desperate for money and whatever. It was just for me looking, it was just total greed. They just wanted the income from absolutely everywhere. And it gave them a lot of credibility when obviously there was people for like that Princess Anne and whatever coming in and opening up a secure unit or like a different sector of the school. So there's this whole veneer around the school, it just being this real beacon of hope, and that everybody that goes there is going to be treated like the best, they're in the best capable hands. And I know that my story is definitely not isolated. I know there's other boys that have been through stuff in that school, probably a lot worse than me. I think what protected me from potentially any sexual or real physical abuse happening there is because of what I had been through before, and because they kind of knew, well, we'll just leave him. But they would obviously pick on me and come down on me on other ways and stuff. And that's obviously what kind of the next part of my story leads on to, when I was running away from that school. And when I was running away from that school, I was running away and I ended up in the hands of a guy who was the guy that basically put me in a position where he was in his 20s, I was 14. He had his own house or whatever. I can't remember. He certainly lived by himself anyway, but I think his mum or something had left him. I don't know. But he had his own place, and
Where did you meet him?
he was actually a former like neighbour, like one of the houses that my mum lived at.
Okay.
So he was kind of introduced to me in the community when I lived around there, because I would be in the school during the week, and every other weekend I would get to go home. And that was another thing I've discussed with my mum since leaving care. I just found it so, the whole backwards and forwards, it's just so debilitating, like there was never any stability. So I would get home leave, and I would go back and live with my mum for maybe the Friday or the Saturday or Sunday night or whatever. And the house that she was living in at the time, which is different to where she lives now, there was this is where this guy stayed. So when I was running away, I would end up living in his house. And that's where this is how it intertwines with the whole blackmailing and the chat lines. This is how this gets incorporated into my story. Because I never, excuse me, I never knew anything about chat lines or phone-in lines or anything like that at all. So I was running away from that school. He knew obviously that I was, when you run away, you get reported to the police as an abscondee. So the police are out looking for you and going around known addresses for you and stuff. And obviously I didn't run away at my mum's because I would be found there and whatever. So I would go to his house. And sometimes I'd be there for days or even a week or two at a time. And not straight away. It never happened like for the moment I met him, but gradually over time, this is where I recognized it was like a grooming process with him. This was like this is the real abuse, but with the whole blackmail component to it as well. He started to phone up these chat lines in front of me on the phone as like a form of like having a laugh, entertainment or whatever. And he would have the phone on loudspeaker, and I would hear some of the things that the guys were saying, and they were like talking about kids and abusing young boys, but it was never worded like that, it was never worded as though we're going to abuse young boys. It was always, oh, we're going to, fuck young and stuff like that. They never obviously used, the word abuse. And then he would start talking to them on the phone in front of me, telling them about things that he would like to do to me. with these guys. And I'm thinking to myself, are you going to meet up with these guys and bring them round to this flat that I'm in with you with? Now, that never actually happened, but he would sit and talk about these things. So that was like instilling a level of fear in me, because I'm thinking, well, and he was a big guy, you know what I mean? Like, he was a lot bigger than me. I was like this tiny wee 14-year-old guy, and obviously he was a lot older, and he was massive, like overweight, massive. He could have just sat on me and I wouldn't have been able to move. So he basically put me in a position where, and we were drinking, there was alcohol and stuff, you know, I was getting plugged with alcohol at the time as well. Wasn't really so much drugs, but he was a drinker, and he was getting me drunk and stuff. And then he would just basically say to me, you know, if you don't do these things with me, these sexual things with me, I'm going to phone up Kibble and tell them where you are, or I'm going to chuck you out my flat, and I would be left standing in the street, and I'm going to phone the police and tell them where you are. And I would obviously get taken all the way back to Glasgow, and I would be back in that school that I was just absolutely terrified of, and just terrified of the staff because of the way they were treating me, and just the whole shebang. So he basically started blackmailing me into doing sexual things with him. And at the time, you know, I don't know what I was thinking, or if I could even process if that.
At this point,
14. I was 14 at that point, yeah. So at 14, I don't know if I was even properly processing. Like, as much as I was kind of like, as I touched on before, I was mature for my age, and I had to grow up fast, and I knew my rights, and I was preaching about shit when I was in Kibble about it being an unprofessional environment. But that was when I met him, that was like a whole other ball game. That was different, you know. That was like, whoa. And I do hold Kibble, even though that wasn't an incident that happened in Kibble, I do hold Kibble accountable in some aspect to that, because who were Kibble? Kibble were my legal guardians. They were my parents, but they didn't give a shit about me. They just reported me missing, and that was just a duty for them. That was like a tick in a box. They weren't out looking for me, or trying to get me to come back, or trying to, you know, make me connect with them, or make me feel safe, or trying to do anything that a parent would do if their child had ran away and it had been you know, a breakdown in communication or whatever, and they wanted to try and fix and bring a solution to the situation. None of that happened. Everything for me was dealt with in a very clinical, generic, like sort of matter of fact form, and there was just never any love or any feeling or anything behind it. So he would obviously, you know, put me in positions, and he would say to me, you know, and he would do sexual things with me, in order for me to stay there, basically. So that's how that came about. And then obviously during the course of me living there, and that went on for a long time. I don't know. I reported all that to the police as well, after I came out of care, and he denied all of it to the police. But he knows who he is.
How scary. I can't even imagine. That would be hard as an adult to try to process that, much less being that young and having gone through everything that you did, where you already you had never seen really a stable adult that was consistent with you, where you could even process how to deal with somebody trying to do such horrible things to you. I'm so sorry for that.
No, it's all right. Do you know what the most fucked up part of all of that is, though, is that the one person that I conveyed in or told about this, after it all happened and after I got out of care, when I was doing the blackmailing, there was one particular person who I told them about what he did to me. And that person came to the police with me and supported me and gave him a statement to the police and whatever, because I know that the guy who abused me, these people have always done it before, or they'll do it after. There's always other people. It's never an isolated incident, right? I always recall when I was staying with this guy, I always recall us going to the shops together one day, and another guy who was older than him grabbing him by the throat and putting him up against a wall and saying, "Why are you teaching my little brother to wank?" So there was something about him, and he used to get his windows egged, and he was like at that time like a sort of neighborhood creep or freak or whatever. So there was already like question marks about him. People knew that there was something no right with this guy, and I witnessed another grown man basically accusing him of touching up his younger brother. So that stuck in my head. So I told the police all that when I reported them, because I wanted them to go and look for other people for to, find out the whole story about them. But my point is this is how vindictive some people have been to me over my life, and twisted, and just it's fucked up. The person who was supposed to be my so-called friend at the time, who came to these police interviews and stuff with me, ended up being friends with him just to spite me when we fell out. So the person who I told all my abuse to before I told the police and everything to, and came to me and supported me and everything through all my, giving my statements and whatever, about a year or two later when we fell out, he decided to be best friends with him, and they were like friends with each other on Facebook. And that was just to get back at me. And that just showed me, and this was the guy who was also involved in the blackmailing with me. It was predominantly me, but a friend did get involved in it for a duration of maybe a few months towards the end. And that's what he did. What he did is he went away and told the police that I made all that up, that it was a whole pack of lies, and went away and decided to be friends with the guy when he knew the truth. That's what hurt me the most. He knew the truth. He knew that I wasn't making that up. He knew that that was something that I wanted to, at that point in my life. I've always been ready to tell my story. It's just other people have never been willing to take action or listen or actually meet me even halfway. So that was at 17. I went and reported that guy. And I'm careful not to use his name because I don't even want to acknowledge him. He's just insignificant as far, and as in respect to me as a person in my life. But that's where the chat lines and everything comes into it. That's how I ended up doing what I was doing, because he was blackmailing me into having sex with him when I was 14 years old. He was an adult. He knew what he was doing was wrong. And he was phoning up these chat lines when I was staying with him, and convincing me that he was going to get other guys round to the house and stuff, which never happened, but it still made me feel like,
to think that could happen. That's a really dark corner for a teenager to be backed into, to have to think about that.
It's fucked up. It is. It's just a level of fear that he was trying to instill, I think.
Oh
But he's disgusting. He's never, like, when I look at, like, and this is about me, obviously, when I look at, like, my life, obviously I'm still battling and dealing with so much right now. But when I look, I don't look this guy up, but I just know that nothing's come of his life. He's never turned out to be anything, but I would like him to be held accountable at some point. But my focus is the school, because if there wasn't so much what was going on in the school, I would never have ended up in that person's house. I would never have had the need to run away. I would never have been in a house with a paedophile, basically. I was running away and I ended up in a house in a pedophile's house on more than one occasion. The care system, when I was running away and I was coming back, they were never even asking me like where I was or anything. They would touch on it, but there was never any real pressure or focus or attention put on it. Well, where have you been for the past 2 weeks, or however long I was away? It was just like, oh, you're back to stay, or you've got to go on the run again. They would make a joke and a laugh at it. And at that time, I'm processing like what all the sexual shit that was going on between me and this guy, and I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck's all that about? And he would taunt me. That was another thing as well. If I never done things for him there and then, he would literally dial the number for the school in front of me and be like, I'm going to phone them, I'm going to phone them. And to some people might think, oh, this sounds, I don't know, there's some sick fucks out there always want to pick on somebody, don't they, and make it sound like, oh, it's trivial. But to me at that point, he knew that was a massive, like, fucking albatross that he could hang around my throat, basically. And he knew that was something he could hang on to. He knew how scared I was of the school, and he knew that I would comply with him, basically. I would comply with him. That doesn't mean that I'm giving consent, but I went along with it because I was fearful of going back to a school.
Of course. Oh my gosh, of course. How many of us as adults, I look back at a lot of my relationships that I've had the last decade, and how much longer I stayed than I should have with people because I was coerced, and I was in a place of fear for whatever reason to leave that person, or whenever you're around people who try to make you feel bad about something about your character, and they threaten you even in a relationship with, well, I'm going to just go cheat on you if you do this, or I'm going to do this to you if you do this. There's so often in life that we're coerced to do things and stay in things because of what we're scared is going to happen if we don't. And that can be on a very small level or a big level. But you're so young at that point. That's not that would be really, I mean, I try to think about now at my age, what if I was in that position and I was in front of this big guy who had access to people, places, and things that meant a lot to me, even if it wasn't something that I was totally connected to. Like, let's just say I hated my job, which I don't, luckily, but let's just say I did. But he could go make a call to my job and get me fired, and I need my job to pay my bills. You needed your school, you needed these different things, and he knew that and leveraged it, because he knew that even if it wasn't something that you were passionate about or you enjoyed going to, it still meant something to you. It was one of the only things that you had to hold on to, or one of the only places that you could go if you weren't with him or you weren't somewhere else. You know what I mean? Who could blame you for staying? That's, if anybody wants to question that, that's just ridiculous. Anybody look back when they were that young and say, what the hell was I doing? Like, I was probably screwing off and doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. And if anybody would have put me in a corner with that much pressure on me, I would have caved in an instant, because I don't have that emotional intelligence, that life experience, that guidance, those answers to know what to do when you're in a situation like that. And that's horrifying to think what he could have potentially done to you if you would have.
No, you're right. Totally. And that's not my responsibility. Like, if anybody was to say, you know, you put yourself in that situation, Kevin, because you ran away from that school, and you know, you had a choice, basically, you know, like, basically people would say, well, you had a choice. The guy said to you, either you can go back to the school or you can have sex with me. That doesn't somehow just normalize it into making it right. That's fucked up in itself for anybody to even draft up that conclusion, because the fact of the matter is, legally, I was 14 years old. I was a child.
You're
Do you know what I mean? I was a child. So legally, you know, when you want to bring the law into it, because the law book's been fucking thrown heavy, hard, and forceful down my throat when I've done things wrong. But, you know, I was a child. When I reported this abuse, right, and I reported this guy, and I went to the police, and I obviously had the friend that accompanied me that then decided after a year or two going on to being friends with my abuser, which is just so fucking twisted, because that was just completely manufactured to hurt me. And obviously just shows you the nature of the type of person he is, and why, you know, why you would go away and be friends with a fucking sex offender just to hurt somebody that you were friends with. Just shows you how fucked up he is. You know, like, people can say that, you know, everybody's sick in the head, or, you know, I was sick for whatever I've done, or, you know what I mean? But that's sick, you know, for to go away and befriend a sex offender because the guy who you were friends with, you know, you've had a falling out and you've parted ways. To me, that's just so twisted. That's one of the biggest, I would say, as in friendship terms, that's one of the biggest betrayals that I've ever went through. That's why I don't actually mention my abuser's name to people, because I told my abuser's name to a friend, and that friend went away and became friends with my abuser. I've never even told partners who that guy's name is, like people that I've been in relationships with. We've had these conversations and we've spoken about, you know, that, you know, obviously everybody's asked, you know, well, why did you go away and blackmail the guys? And obviously this is a big part of the story, but I've never once told them their names because I'm paranoid. I'm scared that if I tell them this guy's name, you know, I know people not normal, most, I know they wouldn't, but I just would rather keep that one thing back for myself, because the very first person I told went away and done that. And I've just never been able to get my head around what kind of a person would do that to somebody that knows, because he knew I was telling the truth, and he knew who he was, and he knew what he was, and he knew that there was other incidents involving him as well that I had mentioned to the police, obviously the things that I'd witnessed when we were out in the street and stuff. So he knew that there was a question mark above him anyway with regards to, like, is there other people he's abused? And to just go away and to become friends with somebody like that, it just really let down my faith in like humanity, I suppose. Like it made me fucking really question just people in general and what are their morals like, and where does it end? If you can go and be friends with somebody like that, then you're just this, you're I don't know. There's no words for some things. It's just fucked up.
It's not. It's like, what does that say about that person? You know, it's like how we talk about with, or how you and I were talking about beforehand with trolls online. You know, there are certain issues in the world that having a two-sided argument is legit. Let's just say politics. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the other side, but there are two sides to politics a lot of times. There's this side and that side. Sometimes there's even more sides than two. And everybody's opinion matters, even if the other side doesn't agree, because they're both legitimate. But when it comes to child abuse, when it comes to this horrific trauma that humans go through, I only see one side. You're either on the side of the survivor and the person that went through it, and the side of children and protecting them and in being proactive and being anti-child abuse, or you're promoting child abuse. There's no in between. And that's devastating, especially in situations like yours where you were let down so many times. It probably meant the world to you when you found somebody that you thought could be your friend, and to have that done to you. Like
I know.
what that does to crush a soul and a heart, you know, it's horrible.
I know, it's twisted, like it's completely twisted. And like, see, with regards to like what went on from there, like with regards to obviously, when I reported them to the police, right? Um, Obviously, it was it wasn't historical, because obviously the abuse happened when I was 14. I reported them when I was 17. So I never waited that long. There could have been charges brought against them. There could have been some sort of action. But I think the police just looked at me as because I had a record of running away from care homes and whatever, and I was known to the police for that. And this was prior to the case involving the phones and the blackmailing and stuff that I went on to do. That was me, I suppose, looking back in hindsight, once again, trying to get a bit of fucking justice for myself. And I was let down, social work, care services, friend. Obviously, the friend was after it. But before that, then the police were just like, we can't take it any further. We'll just log it. So that is effectively why I went on to do what I done. I just thought, do you know what? Fuck it. I know the number for this chat line. I'm going to phone them up. And I just basically went into the whole spiral of just me feeling like, do you know what, this is me taking control of these guys' lives. I'm not just taking control of a conversation, I'm taking control of their lives. I'm taking control of how they feel, how they think, and I'm the one that's got the power, because that's exactly what was done to me. I just took it to the extremes. My form of healing at that point, because I had been through so much, was I just wanted to just fucking fuck up their lives as much as I could. And financially is always the best way to go for somebody, because, if you report certain things and there's no hard evidence and these people are just recorded saying it all over the phone. Because one of the big misconceptions about my case is that, one, I set up my own chatline company, which I never did. It was a chatline company that I went on to called All Points North. They're based in Leeds, and they run a number of like phone services and whatever. It was completely over the phone. It was like a carousel service. You recorded a message and you connected with other people through one-to-ones. I don't know if you know the kind of services that I'm talking about, but it's pretty simple and straightforward. Nothing to do with the internet. And I certainly never went to the elaborate lengths of setting up a company and then putting adverts out into the paper to lure them in. That's how it was portrayed in the media. And that's always raised question marks with me as to why that was a narrative that was spun off. And I think that's because the chatline company had a hand, or had some sort of hand in the reporting around my case, because they wanted to keep their name away from it, basically, because those chat lines are just a paedophile playground. And when you go on them, you don't have to go any extreme measures to uncover these guys. They're there talking about, young prepubescent boys, girls, whatever. They're quite open and frank with it. It's not something that you have to go hunting for and spend days. I could phone up right now whilst we're even talking. I'm not gonna, but just as an example. And that's how quickly you can connect with these people, because that's what the service is there for in my eyes. It's there for paedophiles to connect with each other, who I think are probably too paranoid to to use the internet because they hear of so many people getting caught and traced that they think phoning in from an unregistered phone or whatever, they've got that level of security. But yeah, no, that's where it all went. I was going to say downhill, but I don't know if that's the right word. That's kind of where it went into like the second chapter in my life, in the sense of, you know, the phone calls, and basically, you know, I was scamming these guys out of money. I was taking money off of them, but I was destroying a lot of these guys' lives at the same time. You know, I think when things are dealt with sometimes by the courts, right? And I'm no fucking vigilante, and I hate when people have said that, because this was me just trying to regain my power for what I had been through. I wasn't running some sort of a whatever to, you know, I just feel that, you know, I was taking control of a situation that I felt needed to be met at the core. And when you expose these people to their nearest and dearest, like their wives and their partners and their family and their colleagues and their work, that's when you have an impact. See, when these guys are dealt with by the police, there's so much confidentiality around the handling of the case. Nothing's really put out there unless there's like a conviction, and then it's like an expose in the paper or whatever. I was letting the family members, whatever people might think of this, I was phoning up some of the family members and playing the recordings back down the phone to them, and the things and the messages that they were putting out, and the things that they were saying about children, and things that they had claimed to have done to their own children, letting them know that this was what they were saying, whether they were doing it or not. We said this before, you're that way inclined. If you're phoning up a service and you're getting off on talking about things like that, right, and it's a sexual thing for you, and that's what you're into, that whether you're trying to say you've never done it before or not, you're just as bad as the guys who have done it, because that's what you're into. You know, that's a sexual element to you. That's part of what you like. You know what I mean? That you're a paedophile, basically. That is the core of it. But I just felt, for me, like when I was speaking to their family members and I was speaking to their work, especially, you know, I was fucking ruining their lives, and I was causing severe damage and causing them a lot of problems, because I was letting people hear another side to them. You know, the courts are, people are like, you know, as if like we all know we've not got a perfect justice system. It's never going to be perfect. But you know, people are like, you know, oh, what made you, you know, you're no judge and jury. I know I'm no judge and jury. I was just doing what I had to do at the time, one, for to survive, right? Because I'm basically kicked out of a care home at like 16, with zero work ethic instilled in me, zero qualifications, absolutely nothing, just thrown out after everything else that I'd been through care. This was a way of me making money to survive, a way of me coping and dealing with the trauma, basically post-traumatic stress. As far as I'm concerned, that's what I would say I've got. And me basically delivering a bit of justice, because I was never given justice myself, and I tried to seek it on more than one occasion, I would say, but I was always denied it. So that was my way of just getting something back for me. And I don't care how people perceive that, because I know how I was thinking in that moment, you know, what was going through my head, what was motivating me, and why I decided to do what I did. So
good point, though, because your story really shines light on this issue, and it doesn't only happen in care homes or in schools or anywhere. We are not asking those questions. We are addressing and penalizing a symptom, whether it's acting out, fighting, violence, whatever it is that a child or a teenager is expressing. We are addressing the side effect and not asking why are they doing this? Why is the child acting out? Why is this child misbehaving? Why is this child scared of this adult? Why is this child violent? Why does this child want to run away? And why are they running away? We're penalizing what they're doing without saying what happened to make them do that, because a child isn't born. And just how you were saying earlier, you don't wake up just one day saying, oh, I'm just going to be rebellious and I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to go hurt this person, and I'm going to go vandalize this, and I'm going to be a troublemaker, and I'm going to go run away. There's events emotions that lead up to that. And a lot of that stems from something traumatic that we're reacting from. And we don't know maybe what else to do with the pain or what to do with those built up emotions. Maybe we weren't given skills given skills as a child to navigate really hard situations. So we express them, and that can lead up into adulthood too, where we're still expressing and reacting to what we went through as a kid. But that's a very interesting topic of saying, why isn't that a bigger part of the conversation? Why do we just get the kid in trouble or penalize the child without investigating what led up to that? Why are they reacting? We'd have such a better system if we understood that no human, whether you're a child or an adult, shows up in the world as a bad person in society's eyes, thinking that they're doing that. They're thinking that they're doing the right thing at the moment. And what would make a person think that reacting in a way that's not socially acceptable is positive? It's usually because they're fighting off pain or trauma or reacting to it. And we're not asking that question, why? And how do we heal that person so they stop reacting that way and they have better skills to navigate it?
Yeah, you've totally hit the nail on the head, because like for me to do that, and it's such a fucked up thing for somebody to do, right? Like, let's not be about that. Yeah, it's for nobody to actually sit down and ask the most simple question: why did you do that? You know, like that was never something that was ever really properly explored. You know, it was mentioned when obviously I got when I obviously got convicted and I pled guilty and stuff to it, but there was never, you know, nobody's ever, you know, like you said, I was just penalized, I was dehumanized, I was looked on as this really sick and twisted person. But all of that wording and all of that, you know, how they decided to portray me was a lot to do with the fact that the journalist who was reporting on my case at the time, like I said, was somebody who used to be a former friend. So he had his own narrative and he had his own agenda and his own issues with me personally for to put out that message, you know. As to respect to, you know, obviously, mind I said there was a lot of really nasty negative stories written about me that were completely untrue, that I had to get taken down because they were just complete lies, and like they had no substance to them at all whatsoever. You can still find them on certain parts of the internet and whatever, and I've still got the hard copies of them and that. But when, you know, when you've got all of that written about you as well, which is just complete bullshit. Like I had people who said that they were friends of mine and they used to be in my house and they would hear me blackmailing and stuff. That was just lies. That was just so they could get themselves put on the indictment to try and give evidence against me just because they had an issue with me in relation to something else. It was just the whole handling of my case was so fucking corrupt, in the sense of, you know, the people who were on the indictment to begin with were fucking pedophiles who were treated as victims and they were given anonymity, right? And then we had people who were former friends of mine who were aligning themselves with people who had abused me, giving evidence saying that they had heard me blackmailing people in my house. Then we have the, well, that was another guy, but then we have the actual guy who was a so-called friend of mine who aligned himself with my abuser, who was also blackmailing some of these guys as well. He never got heavily involved in it as much as I did, but he still did it. You know, he still actually did that. And he was very much behind a lot of the stories that were put out about me and saying the things that they said. Regarding, you know, just bullshit, saying that, you know, I terrorized people and I was, you know, causing a lot of, it was a complete character assassination. And I, to be honest, I don't even like to give much life to the shit that they wrote about me because it was just bullshit. I like to, obviously, what I'm dealing with now is keeping the focus on the abuse that I went through in these care environments. And obviously why I, you know, actually did what I did in respects to the blackmail, and why I targeted these specific people. And it's took me a long time, Emma, to come to terms with this and to get my head around it as well and to think about it. Like, I've obviously spent years, you know, and people have said to me, you know, why have you never spoken out about this sooner? It's just, it's never been the right time. Now's the right time because people are listening. But I think we're at a frequency level now where people are willing to listen to these kind of things, you know. Fucking 10 years ago, we never had people doing podcasts and whatever, but I think it's different now because it's, you know, different times and whatever. So that's why I've decided to come forward and go to this inquiry and stuff and give my evidence regarding what happened to me in care, because I just want somebody to stand up and say that they wronged me. I had to stand up and admit to wronging fucking paedophiles, and I went to prison for blackmailing paedophiles, the absolute worst possible types of people that there is. I served time in prison for committing offences against them, but nobody's ever been held accountable for anything that's happened to me. So I want some form of justice, however that might look or whatever form that comes in. I want some form of justice. And I feel like at 30 years old, 15 years after being in care, 14 or whatever, I'm entitled to something. I'm entitled to be heard, I'm entitled to be acknowledged, and I want an apology, and I want a review, an absolute review of the whole care system. It needs to be turned upside down and actually properly reviewed. Like, people who are applying for jobs and working in these places, they don't just need to be vented. They need to actually be like watched in a sense. They're like, well, are you, like you said, are you passionate for kids? Do you love kids? Do you want to provide them with love and stability? And like, is your heart in the right place, or is it just a job? Because if it's just a job, go and fucking work at, a retailer's or a bat or whatever. Go and just do a high street job. You're dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with people's development, people's growth, and they've done nothing but leave unbelievable amounts of scars on me that I've had to live with every single day, and I constantly think about it. So if I'm having to constantly think about it, then it's something that needs to be addressed.
What do we do? How can, and I know it's such a monster question because it is systemic. It was designed this way, and it's like this all over the world, here in America too. What do we have to do to make care different? If you could redesign the whole thing, or even just modify, can we fix what's there? How do we make this different in the future, and how can we fight to get it there?
Do you know what I was going to say? And I know this, I certainly wouldn't do it myself, because but I think a lot of, with how damaged the system is, right, and how it's been designed, in order to reshape that system, specifically the care system, I think a lot of people who have got the ability to sort of, they've managed to come out it, they're not as damaged as me. Like, look, there's so many people that have been in care that couldn't even have a conversation with you because either they're dead, they're in jail, or they're just so fucked up on drugs that they don't know what day of the week it is. The fact that I've been able to keep myself away for the most part of that, and I've never went back to jail, and I've never, like, I've managed to keep myself, I've been through, there's been a lot of stuff after prison, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened to me, there's been a lot of wrong turns, there's been a lot of poor choices and decisions I've made, but I think overall I've still kept of myself of sound mind. And I think people of sound mind that have got the passion and the ability, maybe them going into the care system, because they've been through it themselves, that would maybe help change the errors of how fucked up it's been designed to begin with, because the people who've been through it are the people who understand it the best. Bringing in people who've never been through it, they're never going to understand how to fix a problem unless they've been through it themselves. That to me would be the best possible way to even begin fixing it. But I've got a lot of hope for a lot of things in life, but see, with regards to that, I think it's possible, but I think it's a fucking long journey. I think it would take, I think it's a generational thing, and I think it's something that would gradually happen over like fucking 10 or 20 years. I think it's maybe beginning to happen. I don't know, just with some of the stuff that's been going on in the world recently, but it's a slow, I would say it's a slow process. What would you say? I'd say.
I feel the same. It's hard to imagine something happening quickly to where it could possibly even impact in the next couple of years a better system. I almost think society believes that here in America, we call it CPS, our CPS system. People don't know that this is happening. The facade, like you said, it's, oh, they're housing children. There's good families taking these kids in. The staff really cares. And that's what's portrayed, especially if you see anything about it on TV. Like, there's really no controversy of it, except once in a while, like you said, maybe somebody will get convicted or maybe something will happen. But I almost feel that it's going to take people like us, people that care about making changes to say, how do I create a business that competes with that? That's doing it right, and just start it all over again right now. Somebody could go buy a building in their city and apply for everything that they need to get a business license and actually start doing that in the next couple of years, even if it's just 5 kids. That's 5 kids that get a better situation than what they're getting in those care homes, and to actually do something that competes with those systems and start rebuilding something separate. You know what I mean? Almost the difference between
Yeah.
a Walmart and a small business.
No, that's a good way of looking at it, because then that's setting the example for then that if the actual legitimate, I use that word loosely, want to pick up on what you're saying, if a line, like if an independent place set up, you know, like what you're saying, and then they could align themselves with like the child services. I know what you mean by like over in the US, because there's such an airy secrecy around it, the child protection services. It's just so, you don't really hear much. And there was one case, you'll know the one I'm talking about, that little boy in Los Angeles that got really badly abused by his family or something. And there were so many social workers that went in and obviously must have seen the marks and the cuts and bruises, and he was just completely neglected. That I can't remember, but the mother did it or something. It was a really big case. It was on Netflix. I remember watching it last year. And it's just that there is just such like the children's panel system here in the UK. It's all secret. None of it's under the Freedom of Information Act as well. There's very limited information that they can give out to the press, and this public inquiries about as close as we've ever come to actually being able to be heard. And a lot of people are obviously remaining anonymous in this. I'm obviously choosing not to. I want to get my story out there. But there is a lot of people that are, I know that there was a few production companies that wanted to film some people's stories going through the process, going in and giving evidence, and everything was denied. You know, like, I don't know why, you know, if somebody wants to document their story and it's what's happened to them through care, then they should have every right for it to go in and record that, even if it's just on their fucking phone or whatever, you know, like for them to even be denied that. Obviously, information's been released by people speaking out to the press, and judgments being passed by, you know, the judges and the people overlooking the inquiry are going to give a finding and a review and whatever. But I think a lot of these inquiries are set up to fail. You know, they're just there to sort of act as a, you know, we're doing our job, we're investigating the allegations, there's a pot of money, there's compensation handed out, but is there actually going to be like change that's going to be seen and physical, like you can touch it, you can feel it, like it's there? Is that going to come of it, or is it just going to be we've addressed the injustices of what happened to people? Because some of these people are, you know, people that are like my mum and dad's age, in their 50s, 60s, that have been abused in care. So they're investigating a long, basically a fucking lifetime, a historical abuse, and obviously more recent cases like mine as well. But that's what I'll be looking at very closely when it comes to an end. You know, we know what the findings are, we know what the allegations are, but what are they actually doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Because what's the point in spending all this money on an inquiry for them to come back in another 20 years and for people to say, well, it's still the same, it's never changed, I'm still being abused in care? Then the whole inquiry has just been for nothing. So it is a big monster of a question, because it's like, that's the answer. That question holds the solution to it. And I do think people that have been through care, working with children in care, are probably as close as the right kind of people, because obviously a lot of people, unfortunately, have been fucking damaged through that process. They're not fit enough to take on that position. But a lot of people are. There is a lot of people I know that have been in care, just people I've met through life, never necessarily became friends or that with, but just in conversations, and they've become social workers. So there is a lot of people that have went into the position with the right job, with the right sort of mindset, but there's just so many fucking bad apples, and there's so many people that slip through the net, and it's not just one or two. There's that many that's when it becomes systematic, because for it to happen, for me to be going to an inquiry, and for me to be listing at least 5, potentially 6, 7 places that I was in and I was mistreated and abused, sexually, physically, emotionally, mentally, for that to happen in all these different places, geographically in different parts of the country, that is a systematic issue. It's not an isolated incident, it's systematic. It's something that is of a bigger doing. It's something that needs a bigger solution brought to it. And that's obviously one, get rid of the fucking pedos for starts, and get rid of the abusers for starts, and get rid of the people who are there just to fill their pocket with a wage when they can get the same amount of money working. And because some of these people aren't getting great money, because that's all we would ever hear about is we don't get paid enough to deal with you. Like, what kind of a comment is that to say to a child that's in care away from their family and their heads fucking all over the place? They can get the same amount of money working for any other fucking handful of places. So it's finding the right people and making sure that the right people work there. And that's the thing. But I really, I really have got it in for this school, because it's somewhere that out of all the places I've been in, obviously I was very young, fragments, and just, I've got memories that are very crystal clear, and then there's other things I can't remember. If I wasn't sent to that school and I wasn't treated in the way that I was treated, and the things that I witnessed, and just how terrified I felt, that's the fear that they had instilled in me was like next level. For me to be running away and putting myself in positions where I felt like I had no fucking choice, and I was having sex and being blackmailed into having sex with a paedophile. The fact that I was so terrified of a school the school wasn't putting me in that position, but they were putting me in a position that at that moment in time, when I was 14 years old, my mindset was that was the lesser of the two evils, me being with this guy. And obviously I didn't realize it was abuse as such, but in hindsight, we know it's abuse. He's a fucking adult. He's forcing a 14-year-old boy to have sex with him and do sexual things with him, and convincing him that he's going to get other guys around for to do stuff as well. The fact that I chose that environment, right? I can't even use the word chose, because I feel like, was it a choice, or was it just it was just circumstances that were beyond my control. I was a child. I never had the opportunity to go, I'll live there, I'll stay there, I'll be, I had, all of my choices were taken away from me. So the fact that I ended up in a dangerous situation is because of how that environment I was in was being run. If that environment was being run correctly, and I felt safe, and the staff were doing their job properly, I'm not taking accountability for any of that blame, because none of that belongs to me. That belongs to them. And I'm never going to sit there and accept, I think even to this day, and I think there will be maybe possibly some comment made by them or whatever further down the line, because I don't know if other people are going to come out about this school or whatever, but because there's never been much scandal that's hit this school, they've always managed to keep everything well hidden away. And there was just that one article back in 2004. I am expecting there to be some sort of fucking, backlash from them, because as you say, that it's a business, it's a charity, they're making money everywhere, and these people are so the wrong candidates for the job, because they would actually somehow come out, and I don't know how they would word it or whatever, fuck knows what I'm trying to say, but they would still, the point I'm trying to make is they would still try and put the blame on me. Oh, it was his behaviour, he was on a abscond day, he was running away, he was putting himself in dangerous situations. Well, aren't you supposed to be caring for me and looking after me? Like, where does your responsibility come in? Like, why, if I'm so responsible for all my actions as a child, and all the shit that goes along with that, then what was the purpose of use? Why not just take me off the supervision order and not even bother having me in care? Like, where does your responsibility come into it? This is what I mean about the blame. They would put the blame on me for coming out and saying all this about their school. They would somehow manage to maneuver whatever clique that they can in this whole fucking sick system, and somehow put what I've sat and told you today, they would somehow put that responsibility on me, you know?
There's
That's just,
accountability.
it's, mm,
There's no accountability. They're treating the symptom and not the problem.
yeah, no, totally.
I'm so grateful that you're coming out and talking. And I know that we're literally just like halfway through your story. And we talked a little bit about the blackmail part, but I know we'll get into that a lot
We're
more
going
into
to do that.
it too.
Yeah, we're going to do
Talk
that
about
in
all
part
of
two.
that and your story. I mean, it's like you said, you never leave. You're dealing with everything today still. You relive it and you experience it, even if it's not actually going through it. A survivor never really actually gets out fully. Like there's so much that you go through all the time. And I can't imagine the courage that it's taken you to come out and talk about this. And I'm so grateful for your time today. And I know people listening, they're probably like, how do I connect with Kevin? He's awesome. Where can people find you online? Or how can
Just
they
on
connect with
my, I'm not on Facebook or anything like that. I'm just literally on Instagram, just one profile, just my name, Kevin Sutherland with an X. You'll be able to put it up, but that's just my one thing. But right now, Emma, I'm still trying to find my way with this. Like I've not really got any projects or anything lined up. Like I've taken a break from my whole life that we'll talk about in the next part, like everything that comes with, after the blackmailing and the prison and the things the other choices that I made after that in my life. Right now, I'm just kind of like in dormant mode almost. Like this is the one thing I'm dealing with, the inquiry, speaking out, getting reviving the story, letting people understand I did what I did, because in order for me to heal, I need to do that. And also in order for people just to know the truth and not for people to constantly come away from it with this view that I'm just this person who done this and it's as simple as that, because it's just not as simple as that. It's a very fucking complex story. And that's why we've got to do it in two fucking parts, because it's fucked up and there's a lot to it. And, if people want to hear, then that's good. I'm grateful for that and I appreciate it. And I really appreciate you giving me this chance to speak out on it. But if there's a small minority of people out there that want to come for me and say whatever, since I've put up that post about the school and stuff, a few people have, I've never been trolled or any of that before, but for them to come out and start targeting me, that just reveals who they are. And I've not got time for people like that. They're already damaged in their own ways. They need to find the people that come out and target people, specifically, people that have been abused, and whether they've went on to offend or whether they haven't, whether they've done what I've done or whatever. People that target victims, a lot of them tend to be victims themselves, and I've realized that it's because they've not managed to deal with whatever the fuck they've went through. They feel they need to take it out on someone else. So I'm quite mindful of that. So I actually never really retaliate to these people. I just block and never respond. But as I said, I've never really been heavily trolled like what some people have. Do you know what I mean? That we know of, like that. I've had a lot of people come after them, but I'm prepared for it. I've been prepared for all this crap my whole fucking life. I've had to look at all what I've been through. So a few comments on social media is not going to affect me, but I want to link up and network with as many people as possible, because it is an important subject and it's an important matter that needs to be discussed. And you're just as passionate about it as what I am. So, it's good that we can even have this conversation. And what's good as well is people watching can see just easily it is for you to listen, me to talk, and just have a conversation. It's no difficult for people to just tune into what we're talking about and be aware that this is going on, and to just be mindful of, there's more to things than sometimes what's reported in the news, and that's kind of where my story is just now. But yeah.
I'm so grateful for you. And I appreciate you coming on here and talking these topics. I know I was talking to you this before we started recording, but most podcasts, it's talking about the best things in people's lives and all these accomplishments. And most people, we've gotten out of the habit of being vulnerable and saying what actually makes us human. And that connection that we all have is that we all suffer. Not everybody becomes a millionaire. Not everybody's going to start a business in their life. Not everybody's going to be part of that 1%. 99% of people won't, but 100% of people experience suffering and trauma and hardships and go through hard things. That's part of the human condition. And I appreciate you helping normalize that, because I think we are seeing such high levels of depression, loneliness, mental disorders, suicide. And
Mhm.
how easy is it to just ask somebody how they're doing, or to have a conversation and actually talk to somebody? And even if you don't have a solution, and just listen, that's something free that we can all do for each other. But so many of us are so scared to, because it's not your normal conversation, and podcasts like this, and amazing humans like you that are normalizing that and are taking that risk to say, I'm okay with not being perfect. I'm okay with people knowing the hardest things that I've ever gone through, because my hope is that it helps other people heal and understand that they're not alone, and that this isn't something that they're only dealing with. That 99% of people that exist on this world, they're not that 1% that you see online that's perfect.
Yeah,
Nobody's
I
perfect.
know. I totally with you on that. Like, it's so, yeah, it's just, it's such a false parade of stuff that's good. I actually take breaks from it, to be honest. But see, social media, like Instagram, can be so bad. But I think at the same time, it's like I have a love-hate relationship with it. But you've just got to be really selective with who you expose yourself to, who you follow, and what content you see. And see, since I've started to just sort of like just really follow, obviously, people that I know, or things that I'm interested in, and predominantly it's been a lot of pages regarding, like, survivors and abuse and stuff like that, and just get myself away from all the fucking celebrity bullshit. My mind feels so much clearer and better, honestly, because that shit is just so toxic for you. Because you're right, it's unhealthy. It's just so unhealthy. And kids nowadays growing up with TikTok, constantly just seeing just money, success, celebrity, money, success, and then all the sex that's intertwined with it. It's just ruining so many people's developments, because they're looking at it and thinking, this is what I need to be, this is what I need to become.
And they're
But
thinking, that's not me. Like, I don't feel anything like that. There's something wrong
yeah,
with me, because I'm not like all these pictures that I see. And it's like, you're seeing deliberate manufactured content that's not real.
mhm,
Even models and stuff, they're photoshopped and filtered. But girls are also feeling so much more insecure looking at that, because they're thinking, well, that's not me. I have stretch marks, and I have, blemishes on my body, and my skin's not perfect. Theirs isn't either, and the more we normalize these conversations, I think it's going to open up doors for people to understand how not alone they are, and
mhm,
how common it is that people struggle. That's such a manufactured false facade that you can't show up unless you're perfect, because none of us are, and
yeah,
I appreciate you, especially as a man coming forward. There's not a lot of men in this movement, and the ones that are freaking just powerhouse, amazing leaders, and really exemplify what it means to be manly and a man. And it's awesome to see. But I also pray that your voice helps other men feel not so alone with what they've gone through, and helps them, give them the courage to heal and forgive, not just themselves, but like how you said, like, it's not your fault what you went through. And a lot of people take that to heart, and your voice is so powerful. And so I can't thank you enough for coming on here to hang out. And everybody that's listening, please go follow Kevin. He's, as you can tell, he's just a phenomenal human. He deserves our support and our attention. His story is important. We have a lot to learn from him. And a lot of what we're going to talk about next time too, it relates to other different things that and hardships that people go through. So there's really something in his story that a lot of people, everybody can relate to, take with them. And these are things that we all need to be aware of. We need to know what's going on in these systems that have impacts on millions of children worldwide. We need to
mhm.
understand what grooming looks like, and what questions to ask kids, and how to support those who are coming forth and speaking about this. And it's really important that we're giving our attention to people that have an important part in this world, and not just devoting time to all these celebrities who are, propagating all these agendas to us. I always say we pay with more than just money. We pay with our time, attention, and our energy. And I think our focus needs to go more to having hard conversations, bringing awareness to things that we're not going to see on the news. And that starts with taking this podcast and sharing it with as many people as you can, because you're not going to see people like Kevin on the news. They're not going to feature people like him and other people on the show. It's our job. It's our duty to get this information out by sharing and connecting and supporting and giving our time, attention, our money to help support survivors, the things that they're working on, to get their voices out. Bring them on your podcast. If you're listening and have a podcast, I reached out to Kevin. He got right back to me. It's really easy to get. He has a story he wants to tell. Invite him on your podcast. Invite him on any type of content. Share his content. Go to his latest post that he made. It's incredible what he wrote. Go share the heck out of that. Bring him followers. Let's get him to 1 million followers. Like, we need to redefine what we view as success, what we idolize, and we need to really create these really strong role models, but it's going to take that grassroots movement. And if you enjoy this podcast, subscribe, comment, like, share, please. This is a small project too, and I'm not going to get featured mainstream either without your help. And this is really important information. I also want to shout out our sponsors, the Save Our Children podcast. That's our sister podcast with Becky and Bridget. Go subscribe to them. They're in the show notes, as well as our other sponsor, Hatch Truth, which is the fastest growing truth community on Telegram. You guys need to go follow them. I have a discount code for their merch site. I don't profit from that, but they gave it to our viewers because they really support our show and want you guys to also have their support. And so they offered you guys a discount code on some of their really cool stuff. I have their Hatch Truth mug, and I also have some other swag from them. But again, I give my money and attention to people, places, and things that matter to me. And I really appreciate what they're doing. Follow Kevin on Instagram. I'll have his links below too, and any other links that he wants to share with me, to share with you. And just thank you guys for supporting and listening. It means so much. When I started this, I didn't think as many people would care that do. I felt alone with how I felt. And so having this project has helped me realize how many people actually do care about stories like Kevin's. And I can't just thank all of you listening enough for taking the time to listen to Kevin and to share his story and support him. And Kevin, just thank you. I can't wait for our part 2. There's going to be so much extra added value with that as well to help complete your story. But we will see you guys next week. And Kevin, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys next week.